In case you just forgot, Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself, and there's a huge international child trafficking operation that's aided and abetted not only by government, but of course the mainstream media. And we are here going to be reminding you this with Charlie Robinson, an author and investigator, someone that I've been watching on the Sean Atwood's YouTube channel that has really provided a lot of important information when it comes to, of course, Jeffrey Epstein and this huge saga that's being significantly underplayed by the mainstream media, but implicates so many important factors in our society that people need to wake up to. Now, the last thing that we heard about Jeffrey Epstein was that there's a new document that just came out that talks about hundreds of slave victims. His dentist girlfriend came out and said that when she talked to him on the phone, he did not sound like he was going to commit suicide right before he allegedly, quote, committed suicide. Now, the dentist chair was one of those things in the photos of Jeffrey Epstein's many places that was kind of weird and creepy. But Charlie, there's a lot more than just a dentist chair that's creepy, that's not just connected to his dentist girlfriend. There's a lot of other creepy stuff that Jeffrey Epstein is associated with that you uncovered yourself. What's one of them?
Well, if you remember about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, there was the Sophia Doll, the robot. And it was sort of a PR stunt where the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia gave citizenship to this robot doll. And you remember her because the back of her head was kind of circuit boards and everything. It was really creepy and whatever. That's AI, and we're moving into this new century. And so Saudi Arabia decided that they were going to give citizenship and rights to this robot. Ironic, considering they don't give rights to their actual women, but they decided to punt and just give it to this robot. And we all thought it was interesting and neat and whatever. But you can't sell too many of those robots because they cost lots of money. They're not very practical. However, this company thought that it might be a good idea if they made a doll, Sophia. It would be smaller, about 14 inches long, and it would be an AI doll. The eyes had cameras, it had microphones, it had the ability of tagging and all these interesting features of it. Sounds great, right? Sounds like an interesting doll that, like the new Cabbage Patch Kid, you might want to get that come Christmas time. You could just envision people strangling each other at Toys R Us to get one of these things. The problem is that the person that developed it, two guys, Ben Goertzel and a guy named David Hansen of Hansen Robotics. Ben Goertzel got the funding. He's the chief scientist that created the little Sophia doll. He received $6.5 million in financing to create this doll because they wanted to focus on emotional intelligence. And this was going to be a doll sold to girls 8 years old and up, targeting them specifically. The problem is the $6.5 million he took came from Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein financed the creation of an artificial intelligence doll that would go into the bedrooms with these little girls that would be totally wired up. And if you just let your mind run as to the implications of what this could be, it'd have video surveillance of the child, audio recordings. You could tell if this kid was in a broken home. You could tell if this kid went into her room every day and cried her eyes out. You could tell where she was. All of this information would be fed back to the company, and they would compile this and do God knows what with it. So as if Epstein wasn't, a creepy perv enough, the fact that he's financing artificial intelligence always was a bit of a head scratcher for most people, because they couldn't really get the connection. Like, you understand the sexual blackmail entrapment ring. We get that. We don't love it, but we understand it. But the AI component was always very weird. And Ben Goertzel was not the only one that received money. He put a ton of money into a variety of. He gave a guy named Martin Nowak at Harvard, who's a professor of mathematics. He gave this guy $30 million to start up a program that was called Program for Evolutionary Dynamics. And what that did was it was the study of population structures, of evolutionary economics, and also evolutionary game theory. And if you think about what that really is, This is sort of the high-tech version of eugenics. This is when they create programs to see what would happen if we took 1 billion people off of this planet. What would happen if we infected only black people with a disease and they went away? What would happen if we did this or that? So it's a very bizarre industry, and Epstein financed it with not just a little bit of money, but $30 million to get this up and running. So we know about his ties to Harvard. We know about his ties to these scientists. And one of the things that he was doing was funding these guys that were creating programs that looked at how the population would fare based on a variety of events, much like, depopulation events. What would happen if we reduced populations here but increased them there? What would happen if we, infected a percentage of the population with a certain disease? What would the ramifications be of that going forward? So it's very dark and weird.
Yeah, that's also a common factor among many Jeffrey Epstein associates, many people who are in his black book. I know the mainstream media likes to focus on Trump. Other people like to focus on the Clintons. But when you look at the kind of people Jeffrey Epstein was hanging around, it was David Rockefeller. It was Lord Jacob Rothschild. It was Henry Kissinger. It was other eugenicists. I mean, even this Peter Nygaard, he's connected to Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey and Bloomberg are also interconnected, holding secret eugenicist population control meetings that the media is praising as some kind of superheroes coming together. And the media here is extremely implicated, but you could go crazy. There's a meme from that guy with that show in Philadelphia, him pointing at a map of just how interconnected everything is. You could just go as crazy when you look at how interconnected this whole Jeffrey Epstein circle is, especially with Ghislaine Maxwell's sister helping the FBI on its database that, of course, directly is involved in everything that they're doing. You look at Les Wexner, you look at Robert Maxwell, and holy cow, this gets extremely sophisticated and complicated. But we're seeing a kind of similar MO, especially with Jeffrey Epstein, and not only his ties to this creepy AI doll, but to charter schools, working with Bloomberg here in New York City, which goes along the similar MO that we've seen other abusers like Jimmy Savile that ran children's charities before. And all of these creepy people, they're usually interconnected to the industries that they're usually abusing people in. The fashion industry is also implicated here, but let's just try to connect some of the dots here and some of the other things that a lot of people haven't been talking about, but you've been doing a lot of research, Rich, and of course I'm going to the airplane, the 727, that I want you to give an explainer on. But before we get into that, there was also, correct me if I'm wrong, a tail number from a DynCorp airplane. DynCorp is a kind of private military industrial complex organization that has been accused of abuse of children all over the world, and a tail number of one of Jeffrey Epstein's helicopter being the same. Is that correct? And tell us about the 727.
Yeah, that's correct, and that should never have these matching tail numbers. So the thing about DynCorp is that they're a military industrial complex company. They generate almost all of their revenue from the Department of Defense. They were very involved in the breakup of the former Yugoslavia. They were there. So what happens is in these situations, when you've got a war zone, it's obviously chaos, as you know. Communication breaks down, families break apart, cities are blown up, things like that. DynCorp was busted for running kids out of former Yugoslavia. That's not me speculating. They were busted for it. In fact, you can find a video of Dr. Cynthia McKinney grilling Donald Rumsfeld, talking about DynCorp and about their history, and him saying, well, we put them in the penalty box. And she's like, they were never in the penalty box. And so this is a company that has very dark ties, and they had tail numbers from some of an airplane and a helicopter that they owned that showed up as the same tail number as airplanes that Jeffrey Epstein and a helicopter that he had. So that's obviously a red flag. It's a very weird relationship between the two of them. But once you start to understand how long Epstein's been in this game, that his ties are to the CIA and Mossad, then to just take that one step further and realize that to DynCorp is really not that big of a stretch. So they had similarities there. And then we talk about, Epstein's airplanes, and we know he had a Gulfstream 4, he had a Gulfstream 5. Those are fairly modern smaller airplanes that very wealthy people have. But the Lolita Express is an interesting plane because it was built in 1969. It's an old plane. It's a 50-year-old airplane, and it's a 727. And originally they were built by Boeing, and they were sold mostly to TWA, Trans World Airlines, which is no longer in business. But they were really popular type of plane back then because they were small enough that they could land and take off from smaller runways, meaning smaller airports. So they gave you access to lots of places that other planes couldn't fly. But there was a weird component, a weird design to them. So the back tail has 2 engines on the side of them, but it also has a 3rd engine right in the middle. Now, I'm not talking about on the wings. I'm talking about the back tail of it. So 2 and then 1. And what that one engine in the center did was it created a very unusual S-shaped duct. And so the air came in and then went through an S-shaped duct and came out the back. Not the most efficient way to build it, but back then there was a requirement that you had to have more than 2 engines if you wanted to do transoceanic flights. So this qualified, and so TWA was able to use this plane quite a bit. There's another interesting component to this plane, and that is that these days, we're used to just walking through the jet bridge and getting onto the plane right near the pilot, and then boarding and getting off that way. But on these planes, they also had a rear staircase that would come down. Now, you don't really see it too much, but if you're in some obscure country or some small airport, they'll take that mobile staircase up to the front just like normal. But then there's also this back stairway that would fold down, and you could go out the back. It's pretty obsolete. But the thing about it was that there was a little bit of separation between the cabin and where that staircase was. It was a little bit almost like a cargo area that you had to walk through if you were getting off through the back of the plane. And technically you could deploy that stairwell, that rear staircase, while you were in flight at certain altitudes without it depressurizing the whole cabin. If you remember back in the 70s, that guy D.B. Cooper, who hijacked an airplane and asked for $250,000 worth of ransom, got the cash, got back on the plane, they took off, and then he parachuted out and was never found. He parachuted out of the back of that plane because it was a 727, and he could put the stairwell down, go down it, and jump off and parachute. So Epstein has a 727 plane. That's the Lolita Express. It's an old airplane, not that expensive to buy, but pretty expensive to maintain it. And it's the same type of airplane that the CIA loved, and they would use during the Air America time in Vietnam, and also when they were doing a company called Southern Air Transport, which was a CIA front company that was involved in running drugs, Iran-Contra and all that stuff. So the CIA loves these planes because you can put the staircase down and drop things out of it. So it makes you wonder, why did Jeffrey Epstein have a plane that had this unique function? I mean, he already had 2 Gulfstreams. So to have this third plane makes you kind of question what it was for. And I will say there's an interesting point to this, and it's relevant for somebody that's been in the news recently. A guy named Peter Nygaard, Canadian clothing billionaire, scumbag, also owns an island in the Bahamas, also friends with Prince Andrew. He also owns one of these planes as well. So did the Getty family. They bought it from Ron Perlman, who was from Estee Lauder and a member of the Mega Group and the former head of the World Jewish Council. These are people with ties to Epstein. Donald Trump owned one of these airplanes as well.
Yeah, I actually have a photo right now of Trump's 727 with the logo Trump right directly on it right now as you're speaking.
Yep, he had one too. So the question is why? Why this airplane? These guys have all the money in the world. They're not price sensitive. They could buy what they want. Why are they buying these older airplanes that have this unique function to it? And I think the answer is that there's something more going on. I think that Epstein had, obviously we know about his work with sexual blackmail, but his connections to Wexner are interesting. Les Wexner, CEO of Limited Brand, was the guy that got him started with that mansion in New York, as we know. But Les Wexner also owned the Lolita Express before Jeffrey Epstein did. And that plane was wired for what they said it was wired because Epstein needed it for a mobile trading desk. Well, nobody in Wall Street did any trades with him, so we know that story's not true. So why was there so much electronics on that plane? The assumption is, and I think it's right, is that it was wired with cameras and microphones and all that good stuff, and it was going, that footage was going somewhere. So you've got Les Wexner owning the Lolita Express before this, but then there's another component to this that's even more interesting, and that is that this Southern Air Transport Company, the CIA front group that ran this airline that was flying cocaine in, flying money out for Iran-Contra, they used to be based in Miami. In fact, they were based in Miami for a very long time. They relocated in 1995 from Miami to Columbus, Ohio, which is where Limited was based. And they did that because Les Wexner made that happen. And he said, well, I need this company to fly the routes between Columbus and Hong Kong, obviously to fly in products for Limited. Now, you could have anybody do that. You could have a cargo company do that. You could have your own airplane and do that. The question is, why are you moving a CIA front group airline from Miami with these special old planes to Columbus, Ohio, just to run cargo for you? It doesn't add up. It makes it sound like there's something more to this story. And as soon as Southern Air Transport went out of business in 1998, Wexner changed ownership of that plane, put it into a different ownership group, and then 3 years later transferred the ownership of that into Jeffrey Epstein's company in 2001, which is where it remained until August of 2019 when they decommissioned the tail number. I don't know where that plane is now. It's not showing up on any of the tracking software, so you can't seem to find where it is. My guess is that it's been scrubbed, re-registered somewhere else. One of the things the CIA used to like to do with these airplanes is they used to like to steal them. They would go to foreign countries and basically like hotwire it, bust in, take the airplanes, fly them off, repaint them, change the tail numbers, change the registration, gut them, do whatever they need to do. But they like to steal these airplanes. So the airplane itself, the Lolita Express, has this reputation of being this party bus, flying party bus, which it was, of course, but it also was a very particular, obscure, weird type of airplane that cost a lot to maintain and wasn't very efficient. And the only thing that we can really put our finger on to differentiate it from some of the other airplanes is as that ability to drop that staircase. And so then you just let your imagination run with that. What are they doing? Are they dropping drugs out? Are they dropping guns out? Are they dropping people out? I mean, are they throwing people out? I mean, hey, it's Jeffrey Epstein. Everything is on the table. So it's something to consider.
Yep. The government stealing? No, there's no way they would do that. The CIA stealing these airplanes? Who would have thought? I mean, I'm watching actually Narcos Mexico right now, and an extremely really good series. But again, they just right in your face show you how the CIA is connected with the School of Americas, setting up that torturer. Again, I don't want to spoil too much for you, but I don't want to spoil the series if you haven't watched it yet, but again, it's all interconnected top Mexican mafiosos that are interlinked with the CIA, running drugs, running guns to, of course, Latin American countries where the intelligence agencies want to overthrow their governments, and they're running the drugs at the same time. That's the operation of the intelligence agency. Yeah.
Narcos is that new version of the series is based on Kiki Camarero. So that's a real person. That's a real story. So the reason why it sounds kind of familiar is because it's based on real people doing real things. Yeah, it's I know it sounds crazy to people that are hearing this for the first time. Like, the CIA is running drugs. Like, get out of here with that. Look, they made movies about it. American Made is about that. I mean, Sean Atwood wrote that book, American Made, and that talks about that. It's not even debatable anymore. It's just a matter of the degree in which they were bringing in the cocaine, and they were bringing in a lot of it. To say they were bringing in a ton of it is accurate.
American Made was the one with Tom Cruise, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I remember watching that movie, and I was like, wait. They shed light about 50% of what happened, but they never really gotten the full light on there. So I can only imagine Narcos Mexico still not having the full truth out there. But even the little truth that they slowly let out there, holy cow, it's mind blowing. And intelligence agencies are able to cheat, steal, lie, send in drugs that destroy communities, send in guns that create revolutions and kill people, why wouldn't you think that they wouldn't be doing more horrible things, including running a child extortion trafficking ring? Which leads me to my next question. What do you think is happening here? In my own personal opinion, I believe Jeffrey Epstein was kind of middle management, and I still think there's a slight possibility that he could still be out there. Most likely he was kind of killed off just to kind of get away from a lot of the scrutiny from this entire operation. But to me, the other people that really aren't in being investigated, that really aren't in trouble, the Les Wexner, the Ghislaine Maxwell, these individuals, in my opinion, were higher up on the totem pole and were more in charge. But that's my own speculation based off my own personal beliefs. What do you personally think was going on here?
I actually think the same thing. I think there's an 80-20 chance that he is dead versus still alive and smuggled out. And the reason why I think that he's dead versus smuggled out, and I must say that if ever there was a person that had the ability to get out of a prison, get swapped out, however, it would be Jeffrey Epstein. Not obviously he had a vested interest in getting out, but I think there's some very powerful people that had a vested interest in getting him out. But what changed my mind, so I initially went down that path thinking there's no way he's dead. This was either a different guy or some sort of switcheroo or something. What changed my mind on it was actually Sean Atwood and talking to him. And he was saying that these cartels, if you get busted and you talk to the feds, they kill you. And for them to make an exception and take this guy out and give him plastic surgery, put him on an island, take him to Israel, whatever the speculation is, that would be sending the wrong message to everybody else that if you screw up and you get caught and you talk to the feds, we'll bail you out. And Sean was saying that is not how those sorts of things operate. They would kill him to send the message to everybody else that you don't talk. So that's why I say I'm 80-20 on that, though I acknowledge that if ever there was a guy that could make it happen, it would be him. I do think that he's middle management. I think he's running the East Coast franchise of this, New York, Palm Beach, Virgin Islands, maybe a little bit in the New Mexico. But by no means is he the top dog. I think that when you're running a secret sexual blackmail operation, it works a whole lot better when nobody knows who you are. So when you become world famous for running a sexual blackmail operation, A, you put too much heat on everybody. B, you become irrelevant because you're no longer able to, invite people down to your island to get them on camera because they all know what's going on now. So he became expendable, of course. So if he's running the East Coast operation, there's got to be someone running the West Coast operation. There could be somebody specific to Washington because it doesn't look like he did anything all that much in Washington, D.C. So there's that Craig Spence type operation that we saw in the 80s. DC Madam as well. Yep, for sure. I think all of these guys are interconnected. One of the things everyone is assuming he's Mossad, and I think he probably was. But if you're going to be running this operation on U.S. soil, the CIA knows who you are, and the CIA would know what you were doing. And now, when you look back at what he was doing in the 80s, you will see that he has direct ties to the CIA through BCCI, that old CIA bank, the Bank for Crooks and Criminals International that was shut down in the early 90s. He had ties to that. He was moving money around for them. So I think what we'll find out is that he was a money launderer for sure. I don't think that he was a hedge fund guy, although it's possible he could be using blackmail money from these idiots that he catches and then managing their money, their blackmail money. That could be one thing. And he could just be putting it in a mutual fund for all we know and collecting 2 points and plus 20% of the profits and just extorting these guys that way. But I think that his ties to BCCI and the CIA from the 80s makes it pretty obvious that he was involved in this for a very, very long time, which is the reason why he operated and acted in a way that sent the message that he was untouchable, because he probably was. But you can only play that card so many times before they get a little bit tired of you and they put you out to pasture, which is what I think happened. Obviously he did not kill himself. For anyone that I don't know that anybody that thinks that, but I just to set that narrative at rest, you think about, you would kill yourself after you had gone through trial, been found guilty, been sentenced to life without parole, and you've been a month in your cell and you're just sitting there and it hits you. I'm never getting out. It's not happening. The cavalry's not coming. At that point, maybe you kill yourself. When you've got a high-powered legal team, you've got millions of dollars at your disposal, you've already pulled off, a great deal once with the system, it could happen. That is not the time to kill yourself. So the fact that people, the narrative that he killed himself, look, it just wasn't the time for that. He could have maybe done that in the future, but it's inconsistent with where you stand in your trial. He still had a chance. And by all accounts, he was not the personality type to give up. He was kind of a bulldog prick that would get in there and just fight everybody. So it was incongruent with his personality type for him to be the type that would kill himself. So it looks like somebody whacked him more than likely, or he was taken out. But the bigger fish are still out there.
Yeah, if you believe Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, you're a special kind of stupid, and I would highly recommend you do some IQ tests on yourself to do that. But I definitely do agree with you. I definitely do see him as kind of a franchise owner. I do believe Peter Nygaard is another franchise owner. He has almost the same kind of circumstances around him as Epstein does. He has a 727. He has a private island. He's friends with the Bushes. Oprah Winfrey is his friend as well, that visits his private island that, of course, he's being investigated in. And I'm wondering, what do you think of these alleged investigations on Peter Nygaard, Julian Maxwell, who, by the way, was given a special exemption not to show up to court, specifically around the court case about her? What do you think? Are they cover-ups? Are the feds holding the tapes now? As Virginia Roberts said, that there is a lot of tapes. There were surveillance cameras. There are monitoring rooms. The feds now have evidence of a lot of powerful people doing unspeakable things. This is according to, again, Virginia Roberts. Do you think that these new investigations on Peter Nygaard and Julian Maxwell are kind of cover-up operations? Do you have any hope in them getting the truth? Because I don't.
Yeah, I think that Peter Nygaard is disposable. He's, he's been sued a bunch of times. He's been accused of human trafficking. He's been charged. I think he's facing 10 different rape cases right now. He was charged with rape of an 18-year-old. He's a certified scumbag. There's no doubt about that. But he's also very high profile, and I don't know that he was at a level where he's able to get away with this. Now, Julian Maxwell, that's a different story, because her ties are so much deeper than Epstein's because of her ties. Her dad was Robert Maxwell, who was which is a big newspaper empire. He was the Rupert Murdoch of the UK. And a notorious guy, by the way. He stole all the pension fund money out of it and screwed all his employees. He was a spy for the Soviets. He was a spy for the Mossad. He was a spy for MI6. So he was involved in all of this. And what he was doing is he was running blackmail operations himself back early when Julian Maxwell was just a kid. So he came up in this, and Julian Maxwell has these insane connections to the royal family. She has connections to the BBC. She's protected in a way. I mean, she's essentially royalty. And so she is pretty much off limits. And of course, she no doubt has access to these tapes. And if these people were not amateurs, they knew what they were doing. So they definitely had backup plans. They definitely had kill switches, and they had dead man triggers, and they had evidence stashed all over the place. I'm sure they made it very clear that if they go down, a lot of people are going down. So there's a vested interest in keeping her above ground. But there's also an interesting relationship between her sisters, and you mentioned it early on at the beginning. She's got a sister named Christine Maxwell. Christine Maxwell started a company called Chiliad, and it is a data mining company, and they work with the FBI with their counterterrorism data warehouse. This is a software system that manages the FBI's counterterrorism data. Think about this. Christine Maxwell's dad was also Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell was involved in the Promise software that was stolen by from a company called Inslaw in the United States. It was repackaged through the Israelis, put a back door into it, and then it was sold to foreign countries, and obviously not told that there was a back door in it. This was a huge gain for Israel. They stole all kinds of information. They had the inside track on all of these countries, what they were doing. They knew what was happening. So the FBI's counterterrorism group decides to store their terrorism data with a woman whose dad was running, whose dad had the Promise software, which had backdoors built in that was stealing data. Why would you do this? Why would the FBI do this? This is insanity. But they did, and they still do. And so Christine Maxwell is running this. Now, she's married to a guy named Roger Molina, who works at NASA. Red flag. But Roger Molina's dad co-founded Jet Propulsion Laboratory back with Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, and he was friends with Aleister Crowley. So this has got to be the craziest Thanksgiving dinner table of all time, I got to say. So Christine Maxwell's running this Chiliad company. Then you've got the other Maxwell sister, Christine Maxwell's twin sister, Isabel Maxwell. She is the head of the World Economic Forum's technology division. And what are they doing? What are they focused on? They are focused on something called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which sounds nice, except that when you look into it, what is their primary objective? They're working on brain implants, artificial intelligence, and mind control. So Epstein's funding AI. Ghislaine Maxwell's sister is also in charge of AI, mind control, and brain implants for the World Economic Forum, which has ties to the Rockefeller Foundation. Shady. The whole thing is shady. This whole thing.
And then some of the scientists that Jeffrey Epstein hired, Peter Thiel's hiring now. I have the picture up right now of Peter Nygaard's Super 727 airplane here. And again, like, how more obvious do you need to be? And I want to thank you for all the research that you've done, Charlie. I want to kind of leave you with the last word here, and then where else can people find your work?
Yeah, you can find my work. I wrote a book called The Octopus of Global Control. It's a book that tackles control structures. And when you write about control structures, you wind up finding out about sexual blackmail operations. So I've been into this Epstein, not just limited to Epstein, but this whole concept for years and years now, looking into it. You can find me at theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. I also have a new podcast that's about to start called Macroaggressions with Charlie Robinson. The audio will be wherever you get podcasts. The video component of it will actually be on David Icke's new platform called Iconic. So you can check me out there.
Nice. The links will be down in the description below so you guys could see everything yourselves. I want to thank everyone so much for watching and supporting independent media in any way that you can. Sharing this video is a very good way to do that, because guess what? Because we talked about Jeffrey Epstein, because we did the job that the mainstream media doesn't do, we're going to get punished for it, downranked in the algorithm, and of course, demonetized, just like my t-shirt says right now. But only because of you guys caring about the truth does our work get out there. Charlie, thank you again so much, and thank you all of you amazing human beings for being a part of this independent media organization. Stay tuned for more here on wearechange.org.